My name is Joe Park, CEO of Horizon Stewardship. Welcome to today's webinar, Finishing Strong in 2021. Joining me today in this webinar is Christine Miller, who was instrumental in the creation of the Year-End Giving Guide. Christine is a partner at Horizon's, really my second. She's a CFRE, been doing this work for a long time. So those of you that are watching this live or the recording, you're in for a treat. Christine, would you tell us a little about yourself?
Yeah, hi, Joe. Thanks. So welcome, everybody. So I'm really grateful to be with you today. As Joe said, I am a partner with Horizons and have been with Horizons since about 2009. Been doing this work for quite a while, actually a little over 20 years. I live in Michigan and I'm an Episcopalian, but I speak other denominations as well, mostly working with mainline churches all over the country. So welcome, everybody. I look forward to hopefully inspiring you to create some ways for people to help support your ministries towards the end of the year.
Christine, before we get into the presentation, I want to tell everybody about Giving 365. If you're not already using this resource, I would encourage you to. In Giving 365 are hundreds of videos and webinars and blogs and published articles that all deal with creating cultures of generosity. And so if you haven't already signed up, I'd encourage you to do so during our webinar or after our webinar today and avail yourselves of these resources. Christine, if you want to flip to the next slide, we've got a great picture of you and I. I'm going to turn it over to you. I know last year we heard so many positive results from churches that used our year-end giving guide. They were astonished by the year-end giving that they cultivated that they hadn't seen before. It's always a big year for churches, but about a third of total giving is happening in this year-end season, and we want to make sure that every church has an opportunity to maximize your ministry funding by following the guides that we laid out today. Christine?
Thanks, Joe. Yeah, it's interesting. I just read a statistic today, 30% of annual giving happens in December. That's for churches and nonprofits, and 10% happens in the last 3 days of the year, 10%. So we will definitely be encouraging you to put to work some of these strategies that we're going to lay out for you. And I heard a lot from my clients and my friends last year when we did this, just how impactful it was. So we wanted you to ask questions along the way. As Joe said, put them in the chat. We'll give you the information to download the year-end giving guide. And we'd love to hear from you to figure out how it went for you, what worked, what maybe didn't work, what would you like to know more about, so that we can continue to build on this as we go through to next year. So keep in touch and let us know how it goes. So we know, all of us that are on this call know just what a challenging and rocky 18 months or so that it has been. And it looks like the year ahead will be potentially a little rocky too. So it's been challenging for us to get people's attention and for us to really hold their attention, particularly when it comes to financial giving. So we're hoping to share with you some things that we've learned as a result of this pandemic, and hope you to really end this year in a really strong financial position. So here we go. We're going to start with the first of the 6 strategies. This first strategy is just being aware of what's going on in philanthropy. Of course, we as the church are a slightly different organization than other nonprofits, but we are certainly part of the philanthropic landscape and need to be aware of kind of what's going on. For those of you who may not have seen the latest Giving USA information, which is an awesome resource if you haven't availed yourself of it. Giving USA provides really great data. And in their report about giving in 2020, they let us know that giving to religious organizations declined again Now it's still 29%. We still get the largest piece of the pie. But in the early 80s, it used to be 58%. Religious organizations used to receive 58% of the total charitable pie. So basically what I'm trying to convey to you is that we're in competition. We're in competition with the other nonprofits. And in some cases, even other churches. People have a church in 2 different locations, perhaps, or maybe supporting other churches that they've developed a relationship through the pandemic, through online worship. So we are definitely in competition. And so we need to make sure that we are raising our game to meet that competition. Many churches, Joe, that I've been speaking to are also experiencing a new phenomenon where pledging is not the only game in town. Many churches focus really hard on pledging, and it's really not the only way people are contributing today. So it's really important that outside of the pledging process, we also engage and invite people to make contributions. And so this year-end giving opportunity is really one of those ways that you can invite people who maybe haven't made a pledge to your church to do so, to make some sort of a financial contribution. So watch for that trend. Financial leaders. So these are the folks, you know who they are. They're the people that are heavily invested in the ministries of your church. They're the people that can comprise 70, 80, 90% of the giving that comes to you on an annual basis. Now's a great time to let them know what you're doing, what you're up to. What does 2022 look like? So let them know through a Zoom call, maybe meet for coffee or however you're most comfortable, but invite those financial leaders on a one-on-one or even as a group Zoom call to keep them up to speed and let them know about the ministry that you have planned for 2022. This will engage them in a really important way and invite them to weigh in and then also to financially support you. And last but not least, most of the churches we are working with have been extremely busy throughout this season, establishing new programming, figuring out ways to offer program in new and different ways, realigning staff to meet the current needs of the church. And so year end is a great time to let people know, what have you been up to? What have you been doing? Some churches fail to do that and people think, oh, they haven't been doing anything. They've just been sitting around, they just work once a week on that Sunday morning when we see them streaming. We know that's not the case. We know that you've been very busy doing a lot of wonderful ministry. So let people know what you've been up to so that they can plug into it and also financially support it. All right, strategy number 2, I'm going to admit this one I think is my favorite. It's really, really cool. Giving Tuesday. Giving Tuesday, for those of you who don't have it yet on your calendar, it is November 30th. Let me explain what Giving Tuesday is first, for some of you who may not be familiar with it. It was developed back in 2012 as a way to kind of culturally balance that Black Friday, where it was the biggest shopping day of the year. Giving Tuesday has become one of the biggest charitable giving days of the year. Last year, $2.5 billion, $2.5 billion donated by 35 million people on Giving Tuesday. Now, I'll bet that some of those people were members of your churches. So these are people who want to make a contribution, want to do something significant, want to be a part of this Giving Tuesday movement. So one of the things to remember is, first of all, your website. Most all of these gifts were given electronically. So make sure that your website is up to the challenge. This year so far, I counted the other day, I made 30 donations to churches and nonprofits this year on their website or through text to give or some other electronic vehicle. And I can tell you there's a lot of differences among those that are really fun to use and efficient and intuitive and those that are not. So test out your giving portals and make sure that they're up to the challenge of receiving gifts. A donor should leave your website feeling fulfilled, feeling excited and not feeling like they're exhausted because they had to jump through 16 hoops just to get to the giving page. Make sure your giving page is easily accessible, and make sure to test for default settings. One of the things that churches and nonprofits often fail to do is to check what happens after the donation has been accomplished. So there's a confirmation page that happens on your website, lets people know that their giving has been successful. There's also an email that typically is sent to the donor. Make sure that that email is customized so that it reflects your church. It offers gratitude to the donor and maybe says something about your vision and mission and what that person has just invested in. So QR codes, you see the little dinosaur guy on there. QR codes are back. They sort of faded away for a while, and people weren't using them. But now most of us have had the experience of being in a restaurant where we've had to use a QR code to access the menu. So QR codes are back. For those of you who know how to read a QR code, you can grab that QR code right now off the screen that you're looking at, and it'll take you to Horizon's homepage. But I don't want you to go there right now because we're still in the middle of giving you some strategies. But you can use your phone and grab that QR code, and it'll take you to Horizon's website. So make a QR code to help people get quickly to your giving page. You can put that on Giving Tuesday, hashtag Giving Tuesday, put it on your social media, put it on your bulletins, put it on your website, anywhere that people have access to information. Go ahead and make yourself a QR code and put it there. You may want to think about creating a separate landing page so that you can track how many people are actually making a gift to you for Giving Tuesday. The hashtag Giving Tuesday is going to be everywhere. You're going to see it on social media. You don't have to be the only ones out there putting the hashtag Giving Tuesday. You just have to connect the dots and let people know that you are participating in Giving Tuesday, and they can make a contribution to your church or nonprofit as a part of the Giving Tuesday movement. You might also consider putting Giving Tuesday as one of the funds on your drop-down menu on your website. That gives you another opportunity to track. I know some churches who did Giving Tuesday last year chose a particular outreach ministry or a particular youth program that they wanted to have all Giving Tuesday contributions go to. So you can feel free to do that as well. Or if you feel like you just need some additional resources for your annual budget, feel free to just go ahead and do that. People want to be a part of that Giving Tuesday movement. Some of you might recall in 2020, there was something called Giving Tuesday Now. It was in May. And this was a supplement to the regular Giving Tuesday. And it was intended for healthcare workers, small businesses, and those others who have been impacted by COVID. And just on that day alone, $503 million were raised in just 24 hours. So people want to be a part of something like this, and I really encourage you to consider it. It's very inexpensive to do. Basically, it takes some time. It doesn't really take any resources. There's a lot of information on the Giving Tuesday website to help you plan what you're going to do and how you're going to publicize it. But I encourage you to go ahead and get started with the Giving Tuesday movement, and make sure, again, that your website is up to speed. Make sure that everything is optimized so people can access it with their phones and tablets, and get those gifts to come in for you on November 30th.
Christine, before you move on, just a couple of thoughts. One, I want to remind everybody that these points that we're covering, or Christine's covering today, are described more fully in the giving guide, which will be sent along with this webinar. And want to just stress one more time something Christine pointed out about the default settings in your website, in your e-giving platforms. Many churches are surprised to learn that they can adjust those. Almost everything can be adjusted, but when your provider sets it up, they just put in the basic default settings, and If for whatever reason your provider isn't allowing you to change those, there are plenty of other providers that will. So don't accept something on your website that sounds like, give somebody a receipt that looks like it comes from McDonald's, or a message that seems impersonal. Very likely you can change those things.
Yeah, thanks, Joe. I can't stress that enough. In making all those gifts to all these different organizations, I can tell you very few people have really customized those options. And more times than not, it looks like a receipt from Target or McDonald's or someplace, and it's not relational. And a lot of times it can actually do more damage than good. So check those. They're not hard to change if they are changeable. And like Joe said, there's a lot of companies out there that you can turn to if you're not happy with the one you're using. All right, strategy number 3, how to use email to inspire generosity. Okay, remember that 30% of annual giving happens in December, and 10% happens at the last 3 days of the year. I know some of the churches I've spoken to about this get a little squeamish, because I'm saying to them, put together a series of emails from December 27th to the 31st. And they're like, oh, people are going to be so angry. They're going to not be happy that we're sending them so many emails. But I can tell you that my experience has been, and those people that have actually done this find that it's not, people do not think it's offensive, and it really generates some additional income. I was just reading a new study from Blackbaud that came out saying that in 2020, online giving increased by 16%. And recurring giving increased by 18% over last year. So there's definitely some reason to include some of that information in your emails. Make sure that there's a link in every email directly to your giving page, and that your giving page invites people to make a recurring gift. So one that repeats monthly, weekly, however frequently the donor wants to make that happen. So in your email, what are you going to say? Well, the first thing is to write your 2021 story. What kind of an impact did you have in 2021? What kind of ministry were you involved with? What kinds of new initiatives did you consider or did you implement? What kinds of things really made a difference in the lives of people who are members or friends of your church community? So write your story. Tell people what it is that you're up to, what it was you accomplished in 2021, and then entice them into what is it you're going to do next year that's even more powerful than what you did this year. Focus on the last week of the year. It's after Christmas, so people are sort of just winding up their year end, and begin to put together a series of emails to your email subscribers and invite them to consider making an online gift. The last, but definitely not least, is make sure that you're prepared to say thank you. One of the best fundraising strategies out there still is to make sure that you express gratitude to your donors. So make sure that you have a plan in place to let people know how grateful you are for their participation. This can be an email, it can be a card, a handwritten card. You might gather a group of people together who are just going to make phone calls just to say thank you. And remember, this is so important. When you write a thank you note, it's 100% thank you and 0% ask. So no ask in the thank you, no envelopes, no PS, no link to your website, 100% gratitude and 0% ask. All right, strategy number 4. There's been a lot going on with the tax laws related to contributions, and some of those you can promote to encourage people to use tax advantaged giving to the church. So first thing is just stay informed. In the year-end giving guide that we're going to give you the link to, there are several links to various publications that you can look at that will keep you up to date with the most current information about the tax laws and how they relate to your donors' contributions. So one thing to know is that there is, because of the CARES Act and the Consolidated Appropriations Act that extended those benefits through 2021, There's still the universal deduction that allows for a charitable deduction for cash contributions to qualifying charities for up to $300 per person. And so this also was extended to include $600 for couples that are filing online. So the 2021 guidelines say that even if somebody's not itemizing, that they can go ahead and donate $600 above the line. So it's deducted from their taxable income. And so it's a really wonderful tax advantage. So if you let people know, remind them of that, they may just send you that that amount in order for them to be able to deduct it from their taxes. Another special incentive for 2021 is that cash contributions are deductible up to 100% of a donor's adjustable gross income. So that's a big advantage to many of your higher level donors. Usually it's only about 60%. So this is a big advantage for them for this year. And again, probably the biggest, most important, and this isn't a change to the tax laws, but it is something that churches don't often know about or take advantage of, is that for people that are 70 and a half, they can still make a qualified charitable distribution from their IRA up to $100,000. What's important to let the donor know that the gift needs to come directly from the IRA to the church. So not to the donor first and then to you. That's a taxable event, but make sure that the donor has that check come directly from their IRA or 401k to you. And that way that's a win-win for both the donor and for the church. So people that are 70 and a half can make that contribution to you directly from their IRA, and it's not taxable to the donor.
Christine, just a quick story about that. 2 weeks ago, I was in Leawood, Kansas, sitting with Debbie Nixon, who is the stewardship director for Church of the Resurrection. That's the largest Methodist, United Methodist church. And that morning, she had sent out an email to people 70 and a half, just explaining exactly what Christine had shared. And she flipped her phone around and showed me that I looked at about a dozen thank you notes that she had already received just within the first hour or two from people saying thank you for that information. Even though they sent it out before, there were people that needed reminders. There were people that hadn't turned 70 and a half, and they were just saying how much they appreciated the church helping them stay informed and being good stewards, because so many people don't get to deduct their gifts, because besides the $300 per person, because of the standard deduction. And this is over and above that.
Yeah, thanks, Joe. That's a great story. And that's also, Debbie's amazing at her job and knows what she's doing. It's a great strategy to identify who in your congregation is 70 and a half and who might have the ability to make that kind of a contribution to the church. It's a brilliant strategy. So thanks for that story. All right, strategy number 5, how to get a grant from a donor advised fund. So donor advised funds are the fastest charitable giving vehicle in America today. Just huge. $27 billion was given in 2020 from donor advised fund grants. Now, for some of you that may be unfamiliar, what is a donor advised fund and what's a donor advised fund grant? So a donor advised fund is just an account where donors make a charitable contribution. It's when the donor makes the contribution and establishes the donor advised fund, and every contribution subsequent to that is tax deductible for the donor in the year that gift is given to the donor advised fund. But it also sits occasionally in the donor advised fund and is not distributed to a nonprofit. However, it always has to be given to a nonprofit. So once it's placed in the donor advised fund, the only way that it can be taken out is for charitable purposes. So the interest is tax-free and allows the donor greater power to make larger contributions over time. It is, again, it's irrevocable. So once the gift goes to the donor advised fund, it has to be for charitable purposes. But you, the church, or any nonprofits that are out there, you are eligible for a donor advised fund grant, and you can be the beneficiary. So how are you going to know, how are you going to learn more about that? For those of you who have denominational foundations, the Presbyterian Foundation, United Methodist Foundation, Episcopal Foundation, there's others. Most of those organizations are establishing donor advised funds for donors. So they would be more than happy, I'm sure, to help you understand more about donor advised funds and how you can attract grants from those donor advised fund. So if you have a foundation with your denomination, please avail yourself of that resource, because you'll be in good hands. One of the other things that often gets people stuck about donor advised fund grants is that some donor advised fund owners don't realize that they can make a gift to the church from their donor advised fund. And it stems primarily from this particular issue around donor advised funds. Donor advised fund grants can't be made to an organization to pay a pledge that is something that somebody signed, committed to. For example, hospitals and other organizations like that, if you maybe pledge $1 million to build a building, you're going to sign a pledge agreement that's actually going to happen. Our pledges are very different than that in the church. Our pledges are revocable. They're not contractual. And so we are eligible for donor advised fund grants. So let people know that you are eligible. Make sure that if you know somebody has a donor advised fund, make sure to reach out and let them know end of the year. And you have an opportunity to give some of that donor advised fund money to the church. Just another note about donor advised fund grants, they also can't be used for things like purchasing tickets or silent auction items and things of that sort. So really just a gift to the church. And you'll want to just make note of which donors are giving from donor advised funds. Sometimes it's a little tricky to tell depending on what they've named their donor advised fund. But when you do know who they are and you receive a donor advised fund grant, again, be sure to write a thank you note. Many organizations fail to write a thank you note because they think, well, they've already received the tax deduction. They don't really need to hear from me. But yeah, they need to hear from you because they need to hear how grateful you are for their support. So watch for this. Donor advised funds are going to become more and more important in the life of the church. And it's really important to know what they are, who's contributing to them, and how you can avail yourself of some of that grant funding. Accelerating legacy gifts. So the end of the year is often a time when people start thinking about or renew their thinking about making a legacy gift, either a bequest or an estate gift is what we're talking about. Plan gift, a legacy gift, lifetime gift. Those are all the same term or different terms for the same activity. People are often taking stock of kind of where they are financially and otherwise. And the number of people looking at making estate plans in 2020 really jumped. So I expect that trend may continue into this year and next as well. So a couple of things to know about accelerating legacy gifts. Just remember, anyone with assets can make a planned gift or a legacy gift. Having wealth is not essential to the equation. In fact, the most likely person to make a planned gift to your organization is someone who's been giving consistently for the last 15 or 20 years. That person would be a prime candidate for making some sort of a legacy contribution. So beneficiary designations or requests are the simplest. There's certainly many other planned giving vehicles, but remember that your church can be the beneficiary of an IRA. They can be the beneficiary of a paid up insurance plan or even a donor advised fund. Remember, the donor advised fund, once given to a donor advised fund, has to be given to charity. There also has to be a beneficiary listed on a donor advised fund. So why not have it be your church? Why not be the one who will be the recipient of that donor advised fund when the people have passed? Another way to think about a legacy contribution is you could be a partial beneficiary of an estate plan or other kind of bequest. For example, maybe the donor will tithe to your church, giving 10% of the estate to you, and then distributing the remaining 90% among the rest of the family. So you can be part of an estate plan while still making sure that family members are accounted for as well. Many people won't let you know that they have made a bequest with the church named in it, or an estate plan, but you can still ask and see if people will reveal that to you. A bequest and a beneficiary designation are both revocable, and so many times if people have made that made accommodations for you in their estate plan, they're going to wait and make sure that it's still what they want to do. And so they won't tell you, but sometimes people will let you know and even give you information about where the asset is, so that you have an idea of what that asset is. Other churches are still doing legacy societies, or naming it something else, but a society in which there are membership only requires that somebody make a bequest or some sort of a legacy gift to the church. The Legacy Society is really not kind of a super club kind of organization. It's really just a way for you to continue to inform those people that have made accommodations for the church in their estate plan. Keep them in the loop and let them know what you're up to, and let them know how important your ministry is. And then remember this, when you're talking about legacy donors, we often tell the story of someone who has passed and made a legacy contribution to the church. And those are great stories to tell. But interestingly enough, the research has told us that people are much, much more inspired by by the story of a living donor rather than from a deceased donor. And I think that the reason they've sort of figured that out is because people don't want to be the deceased donor. They want to be the live donor. So for those people that have made accommodations for their church in their estate plan, or made a bequest of some sort of beneficiary designation, invite them to share their story while they're still alive. Invite them to share their story with others, and invite them to follow suit. So the story of a living donor can be very inspiring. I want to just mention one more thing that I forgot earlier. When you're doing end of the year giving, whether that's an email, series of emails, or Giving Tuesday, or any of the other strategies that we've just talked about, many churches will ask about matching gifts. And a matching gift is a really great idea for end of the year contributions. If you've had someone come to you and say, I'd really love to inspire other people to make a contribution, and I'm ready to make a $50,000 matching gift, this is a great opportunity for you to inspire others to match that gift through their year-end giving. So if you have someone who's mentioned a matching gift to you, or if you have someone that you think would be interested in a matching gift, now's a great time to be in touch with that family and ask, can we use your matching gift to really inspire others to make year-end contributions? Can be really exciting to end the year with that kind of strong effort. So those are the 6 strategies. This is the year-end giving guide. This is the link to it. Again, it's going to be emailed to you along with this presentation. We've got another fun little QR code here, so you can get to it that way as well. The little dinosaur guy, for those of you wondering, why is there a dinosaur on this QR code? If you are a Chrome browser user, you will find that in the URL, up in the URL bar, you can click on that, and up to the right hand side of there, you'll see a little symbol that's a QR code. You can create a QR code to any website page, any URL, using Chrome, and that's where your little dinosaur pops up. So if you don't like the dinosaur, there are plenty of other ways that you can create a QR code, but that is a very simple, quick, efficient way to do one. Joe, anything else before we kind of move to the Q&A? Anything that I forgot?
No, Christine, you did a great job. I do want to remind people we're moving to the Q&A page. Uh, we're going to show you, if you look down the right-hand side of this slide, you can see links to important information, including Giving 365. So if you look at those questions in the Q&A, there's should be a button on the bottom of your page. It says Q&A. If you click on that, it'll show you the questions, and then to the left-hand side of each one, there's a little thumbs up. If you like that question and want to see it answered more quickly, go ahead and click on the thumbs up, and and that will advance it to the top. So here's the first question, Christine, from an anonymous attendee. How different would this year in strategy change if your fiscal year is July to June, since there's no push to make the budget or to finish in the black?
I love that question, and kudos to you for switching your fiscal year to a program year. Some denominations allow that and some do not, but we definitely recommend that because it's much more consistent with how your program year unfolds. And for the reason you mentioned, it also takes some of that pressure off of that end of the year. A lot of churches are on pins and needles until January the 5th, just to know whether or not they've made their budget or not. So kudos for you for that. But I think the strategy remains pretty much the same because it doesn't matter to your donors really what your fiscal year is. Their year is ending and their calendar year is ending, and that's when their contributions are happening. So I think that the statistics and research bears it out that there's a lot of giving happening in the month of December. Like Joe said, a third of all giving happens in December. So if you don't avail yourself of that, by the time you get to the end of your fiscal year, you may not have realized your ministry budget. So I think the strategy remains pretty much the same.
Thank you, Christine. Next question is from Hans. My guys are stuck in the pay-as-you-go or give toward expense model. How can I get them to give toward ideas toward the future?
Well, that sounds like a vision question. Yeah, so, a lot of Joe and I've had a million of these conversations with churches where somebody will have this brilliant idea of, well, if we just told people how much it costs to run the church on a daily basis, we could divide and conquer this budget and everybody can provide their fair share. That's never worked ever, and it will not ever work for a lot of different reasons, but the least of which is that while there are some people who are concerned about your day-to-day expenses, primarily those people who serve on the finance team or one of the other teams in the church responsible for maintaining a balanced budget. Most people are uninspired by that. Most donors are uninspired by that. The most inspiring thing, and research bears this out time and time again, that what people give to is vision. They want to see the impact of the church on the lives of other people. And for Hans, if you're one of the things you might experiment with is to really continue to build your story and tell your story. We have some great resources on Giving 365 about offering talks. Offering talks basically are a moment during the worship experience or sometimes outside the worship experience where you're helping people to connect their generosity with the church's ability to do ministry. So if you start sharing some offering talks, I think you'll see a bit of a shift in enthusiasm about what your church is about, and maybe even convince some of those expense-focused people that telling your impact story is a much, much more successful way that you can increase ministry funding.
There's a great resource that's been written by one of our partners at Horizons, Don Smith. It's a book called A Better Offering. And Don goes through examining the purposes and uses of the offering time. He comes out pointing out that the offering talk or the offering moment is one of the most impactful moments in terms of shaping generosity and building on vision. We're often told by our most generous churches that they feel the offering talk is the most important tool they have in their toolbox in regard to building this culture of generosity. So I hope you'll avail yourself of that book, possibly have your leadership team read it. It's called A Better Offering by Don Smith. Next question is from Philomena. I hope I said that right. If not, I apologize. How can I get my leadership to understand that time-consuming fundraisers are not efficient or sustainable?
Oh, that's such a great question. Yeah, a lot of churches do fundraisers that are just such energy suckers. They really are. And volunteers, aplenty are responsible for the annual chicken dinner or whatever it is that you're doing. I know churches that do rummage sales, and it takes, a month of setup time, hundreds of volunteers, and a month of tear down time, and they end up making $20,000 or less on the whole activity. So I think that that when you kind of take into account all of the time and energy, and maybe really really diagram that out and put it down so that people can see it, what the time and energy is that takes to make that possible, and then what the outcome is. It's just not feasible. And my experience has been that most of the time those fundraisers continue, because that's what the church has always done. It's a matter of tradition. We've been doing that chicken dinner for 20 years, and darn it, we're going to do it again next year. One thing I'll say about 2020 and the pandemic is that it gave churches a lot of permission for change. And so if you have a chicken dinner scenario going on, and you want to stop the cycle of continuing to do that because it's been what you've always done, now is probably a really good time to do that, because 2020 and 2021 have given us permission to make some big changes. And likely your congregation would be more accepting of that change this year, perhaps, than they would have otherwise.
Thanks, Christine. John asked this question: is it better for the Stewardship Commission to thank members for their pledge by email or telephone? Should the rector send a thank you note?
Yes, yes, yes. So yes, the rector should send a thank you note, and if at all possible. In some churches, it's just not feasible, but certainly for your financial leaders, maybe first-time pledgers, people who have made a substantial increase, those would be great ways for the rector to be involved and to write those thank you notes. The research suggests about email versus phone calls versus handwritten note. There is no difference in how the donor perceives that anymore. Now that kind of flies in the face of our grandmothers who said, you got to write a handwritten note with your signature on it. And that's still very warmly received by people of a certain generation. But the research bears out that an email is just as well received as a phone call or a handwritten note. So the point that really needs to be made here, though, is that those emails or phone calls or letters, however they're done, they're personal. They say, "Dear Christine," not "Dear church member," that it thanks me for my generosity, not for my $50, but for who I am, and tells an impact story. So we call that being donor centric. And again, on Giving 365, there's a couple of resources there on donor centric communication, and tells you there's a lot of information. I'm big on thank you notes, and there's a couple of there's a video and some other stuff on how to write an impactful thank you note that your donors will really appreciate. And that doesn't matter if it's an email, doesn't matter if it's a handwritten note, could be the same thing that you use as a message in a phone call. So the important part is thank people, express gratitude. No matter how you do it, it'll be well received.
That video is one that Christine filmed on how to write a good thank you note, 10 things to think about. And I'd encourage you to watch that. It's powerful, it's research-based, and can be really helpful in training people in your church, not to just write thank you notes, but to write really well-crafted thank you notes. Han says, for him, nothing beats a handwritten, personalized Christmas note just to say thank you.
And again, if you've got people that are 65 and older, maybe even skewed a little higher than that, they're going to really look forward to a handwritten thank you note with your signature on it. Those that are younger than that, again, not quite as important, but I don't think you can ever go wrong with the handwritten thank you note.
All right, the last question we have comes from Christy. In order to give a gift from an IRA, can the gift be given directly to the church, or does it have to be given to an investment account that the church has set up?
It's my understanding it can be given directly to the church, not through an investment account. I think that the point is that they want to, that the from a tax point of view, it needs to be made directly to the church or nonprofit organization rather than be made to the donor first and then contributed elsewhere.
Yeah, just to reiterate that, the gift needs to come from the trustee of the IRA, but it can come directly to the church. Doesn't have to go to the church's investment advisor, because it's going to come in the form of cash and not securities. So if they were given securities, that probably would need to be given to the investment advisor. But make sure that folks know not to take or receive that required minimum distribution, but to fill out a form. Usually that can be done online. You can call your broker, whoever holds your IRA. It usually takes no more than a minute to have them send you the form or point you to where you can fill it out online. It's really simple, and then they will forward that check on to the church. A lot of folks are intimidated by that process. They think it's frightening. So sometimes it's helpful to say to a donor who's intimidated by that you would be happy to assist them in doing that. And so you can sit with them while they reach out to their broker. You can be on a conference call with them. They can give permission for you to be there, and they'll be surprised at how easy it was to do. But your encouragement being there with them can be what gets them from no, that's too scary, to yes, now I've given a gift to the church that I can deduct from my taxes. So it's a win-win. I want to thank everybody that's participated today. I want to remind you that you will be receiving within 48 hours the webinar, the seminar, the slides, and the giving guide. Feel free to forward that to whomever you would like in your church. You also see Christine's email and my email. If you have questions, we would be happy to reach out to you or to connect you to another of our 38 folks that work with us here at Horizons who could answer that specific question or help you in the way that you're looking for. Thank you very much.
Thanks, everybody.